Got a spicy video for you guys today. These are the top 8 most confusing GOAT format cards. And I mean confusing in a rolling sense. These are cards where when my opponent uses one of these, I go, oh, here we go. They're not going to know how this works, which can be frustrating. So part of the reason that I'm making this video is just to vent a little. Welcome to GOAT Duels. I'm ACP. Let's get started with a pretty tame one, and that is Thousand Eyes Restrict. So this is a pretty popular card in GOAT format. Most people know how it works. There are a few times where people seem to not know how it works, though. One is when Thousand Eyes Restrict sucks up a token that's typically a GOAT token. Some people think that the token just disappears. That's not the case. Monster tokens are pretty much just like monsters for the purposes of Thousand Eyes. They become equipped, and in the case of a GOAT token, add 0 attacks. That trips up a few people. The other thing that trips up people is that Thousand Eyes Restrict, it does work differently in GOAT format with regards to using its effect and having something chained to Thousand Eyes Restrict's effect. So the classic example is Book of Moon, right? I use Thousand Eyes Restrict, say I'm going to suck up whatever, your Blackluster Soldier, and you chain Book of Moon on my Thousand Eyes. The Blackluster Soldier just stays where it is, right? It doesn't go to the grave or move or anything like that. It just stays where it is. So that does confuse some people because that ruling is different than GOAT. Then occasionally the other thing that comes up is some people don't understand how Thousand Eyes Restrict negates the effect of whatever is being sucked up. So some people, if Thousand Eyes Restrict sucks up a Jinzo, I will have opponents be like, hey, does Jinzo still negate all traps? And the answer is no, it doesn't, because it is no longer in the monster zone. It doesn't have an effect. However, when Thousand Eyes Restrict sucks up a Sangan, if that Sangan goes to the grave somehow, say Heavy Storm, or just Thousand Eyes Restrict being flipped face down later, say with the Tsukiyomi, that Sangan will get its effect because it triggers in the grave, and Sangan did go to the grave. So that is pretty straightforward, but that does confuse some people. Number 7 on our list is Spirit Reaper. And the interesting thing about Spirit Reaper is that the way this card has worked has never changed. From the time Spirit Reaper was printed until now, it has always worked the same. And yet, a lot of people don't seem to know how the effect with regards to it being targeted works. So Spirit Reaper basically says, hey, when this is targeted, it dies. However, it is after resolving the effect of a card that targets it, it dies. So it isn't some sort of effect that goes off instantly. So if you Book of Moon a Spirit Reaper, the Book of Moon resolves, flips Spirit Reaper face down, and then Spirit Reaper's effect, since it's face down, is no longer being applied, so it lives. And most people do know that, but you do get the people who occasionally don't. The other thing that could be a point of confusion is what happens if the card that targets Spirit Reaper is negated. And the answer is it depends. So if I have a Spirit Reaper in play and you use, say, Brain Control on my Spirit Reaper, and I activate Magic Jammer, in that case, the activation of your Brain Control was negated, so Spirit Reaper will not die. Its effect, as far as Spirit Reaper is concerned, it wasn't targeted because the activation of your card was negated. However, and this could come up because there are some decks that play Royal Decree and Spirit Reaper in the same deck. So if you have a Royal Decree in play, Royal Decree doesn't negate activations, it just negates the effect. So if I have a Royal Decree and a Spirit Reaper in play, I attack with my Spirit Reaper, and you Sakuretsu Armor that Spirit Reaper, your Sakuretsu Armor will be negated by Royal Decree, but Spirit Reaper will die because it was just targeted. So that's actually a kind of a niche tip to know in case you happen to go against an opponent who plays Spirit Reaper and Royal Decree in the same deck. You can use your Sakuretsu Armors and Raigeki Breaks and that sort of thing to kill their Spirit Reaper. But some people don't know that, and that confuses them. Number 6 on our list is Cyberjar. And Cyberjar is kind of a weird card. There's a reason that Konami doesn't really make cards like this before. And the effect on the surface is pretty straightforward. You destroy all monsters, you each reveal 5 cards, and then you put any legal monsters on the field. That part is pretty straightforward. Some people could be confused about how Cyberjar works with Jowgen in terms of the fact that, yeah, if Jowgen's on the field, you flip Cyberjar, Cyberjar kills Jowgen, then yes, you can still special summon monsters. Most people do know that. However, there are a couple of things that can confuse people. One is the fact that with Cyberjar, if you reveal, say, 3 monsters and you're going to set all of those monsters in face-down defense position, you can shuffle those monsters up so your opponent doesn't know what they are. Again, it's kind of confusing. There aren't really other cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That do that, which is why I think it confuses people, but that is how Cyberjar works. And then the other thing that can confuse people, particularly in the Empty Jar deck, which I know is not a popular deck, one of the reasons that some people don't understand how it works is, say if Cyberjar special summons a Magician of Faith for my opponent. They set it, right? So Cyberjar reveals Magician of Faith. They set their Magician of Faith face down. I can then mind control that Magician of Faith and flip it face up in the same turn. Because in GOAT format, you could change the battle position of a monster the same turn that it was summoned if it wasn't your monster. So there's a lot of different examples like that. For example, your opponent activates Scapegoat, you snatch steal a GOAT token, you turn the GOAT token to attack mode in the same turn. That's another example. So there are a few quirky interactions with Cyberjar that can confuse people. Number 5 on our list is Last Warrior from Another Planet. And this, again, is a card that seems pretty straightforward. Like, okay, destroys all my monsters, and we can't summon. Like, what could anyone possibly misunderstand about that? Well, the thing that people misunderstand is that in GOAT format, you are able to tribute Last Warrior from Another Planet for a face-up monster. So, for example, if I have a Last Warrior from Another Planet in play, I can just tribute that monster for a face-up attack position Jinzo. And that is something that works different from current format. In current format, you would not be able to do that play, but in GOAT format, you can. And that can even be a good thing to know if you're trying to counter your opponent's Last Warrior. One of the things that I commonly do, say I'm playing a Reasoning Gate deck, my opponent has Last Warrior in play, which is a very good card against Reasoning Gate. I might go, okay, I'm going to brain control your Last Warrior, tribute it for my Jinzo, tribute it for my Blowback Dragon, whatever it may be, and then just go off. So that's something good to know, but that's something that when I do, I have a lot of opponents going, wait, I'm pretty sure you can't do that. And then I have to go find the rolling and go, no, look, says right here you can. And they're like, oh, okay. Number 4 on our list, we're getting to some cards that are a little weirder. And one of those cards is Peten the Dark Cloud. This isn't a very popular card in GOAT format. It's not very good. I mean, it can be okay in some decks. However, there are a lot of people who think this card is way better than it actually is because they don't understand how it works. And that's due to missing the timing. And if you're a current format player, you probably understand the nuances of optional trigger effect and if then versus when you can and all of that stuff. But Peten is an optional trigger that can miss timing, which means that in order to get its effect at all, it has to be the last thing that happens. So of course, if it's destroyed in battle, yes, you get its effect because it being destroyed in battle was the last thing to happen. But if you tribute it for something, even if you tribute it for something with no effect, say you tribute your Peten the Dark Cloud for Summon Skull, you don't get to special summon another Peten. And that's because, in the case of Summon Skull, the last thing to happen is Summon Skull being summoned, right? And same thing applies to any sort of discarding as a cost effect, like Raigeki Break. Imagine how good Peten would be if you could Raigeki Break your opponent's monster, discard Peten, and search another Peten. That would just be nuts. Thankfully, you can't do that. That's not how the card works. The only common card in GOAT format, to my knowledge, that allows you to discard Peten from your hand and trigger its effect is Graceful Charity, because you draw 3 and then discard as the last thing to happen. So keep that in mind before you add Peten the Dark Cloud to your decks. Yeah, it could be okay, but it's not as broken as you think it is. And chances are, if your opponent is playing this card, they might not really know what it does. Number 3 on our list is Curse of Darkness. And Curse of Darkness, it actually can be okay in some burn decks in GOAT format. There are a lot of decks that play a lot of spell cards. And Curse of Darkness says, each time a spell card is played, that player takes 1,000 damage, which is pretty good, right? There's a pretty decent chance you can deal 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 4,000 or more with one card, which is pretty strong. However, Curse of Darkness is worded in a very particular way, and it says when a spell card is activated, that person takes 1,000. And this, like Spirit Reaper, it's always worked the same way from the beginning of time until now, and yet tons of people in GOAT format don't seem to understand how this card works. And I mean that because I will have opponents where I activate a spell card, say, Pot of Greed, I go activate Pot of Greed, and my opponent goes, okay, I'm going to flip up my Curse of Darkness and make you take 1,000. And that is not how Curse of Darkness works. And it would be a lot better if it worked that way, but it doesn't. And the reason why is because if you are doing that play where I activate Pot of Greed, you chain Curse of Darkness, Pot of Greed has already been activated. Curse of Darkness doesn't travel back in time and go, well, just before Curse of Darkness was flipped face up, you used this spell, so you take 1,000. No, it checks for activations at activation, not resolution. It's not like Spirit Reaper. It doesn't say when a spell card resolves, that player takes 1,000 damage. It says when a spell card is activated, that player takes 1,000. So really with both Spirit Reaper and Curse of Darkness, this is all about knowing the difference between activation and resolution. Activation is when you place the card on the field from your hand. Resolution is when you are actually carrying out the effect of the card. So that's a really good thing to know just in general for rulings knowledge. Number 2 on our list is Royal Oppression. And believe it or not, this card is not very good in GOAT format, and yet I've seen videos on YouTube where people even act like, oh yeah, Royal Oppression, this card is broken. And it's like, no, if you knew what this card actually did, you would not think it's very good. There's a reason why no one really played a Royal Oppression in Yu-Gi-Oh! Until 2007, when its ruling was changed. So, how did Royal Oppression work in 2005? 2 things. One, which is pretty important, is that you can't use this in the damage step. So if you think, oh, my opponent's playing Chaos Recruiter, and I'm going to side in Royal Oppression to counter their Mystic Tomatoes and Shining Angels, you are going to be sorely disappointed, because Royal Oppression does not do that. However, the most important thing to know about Royal Oppression is that, and this applies to all continuous traps in GOAT format, is that you have to flip it face up preemptively. In the sense that, say I activate Premature Burial. My opponent can't go, okay, I'm going to flip up Royal Oppression, negate your Premature Burial. Same thing if I'm playing Chaos Sorcerer. If I go summon Chaos Sorcerer, they can't go, okay, I'm going to flip up Royal Oppression, negate your Chaos Sorcerer. So what this means is that you have to have this oppression already face up. So you would flip the oppression up, say in my draw phase, and in my main phase, I'd go, well, I have this Chaos Sorcerer, but now that I see that my opponent has a Royal Oppression, I'm just not going to summon it. I'm going to wait until I draw my Heavy Storm, or my Phoenix Windblast, or my Breaker, or whatever it is, sub out 2 oppression. So that really is why oppression is not a good card in GOAT format. And I would say half the time this card gets activated against me, my opponent doesn't know what it does. I summon a Chaos Monster, they try to flip up their oppression, negate it. I'm like, yeah, buddy, that's not how this works. Sorry about that. And number 1 on my list, this might surprise you, but this card really triggers me. Not because of its power level or anything, but because of how so many people just refuse to resolve this card correctly. And that card is Skilled Dark Magician. And this also applies to Skilled White Magician, but Dark is the more common, so that's why I picked Dark. And again, this is a card that on the surface, pretty straightforward. What the heck is so hard to understand about how Skilled Dark Magician works? However, I would say 75% of the time I have this card played against me, my opponent refuses to put spell counters on it when a spell card is activated. And I remind them, they'll have a Skilled Dark Magician in play, I'll go activate Pot of Greed. I'll draw my 2, and I'll go, hey, can you, I'm nice, I say, hey, can you add a counter to Skilled Dark Magician? And my opponent's just like, no. I'm like, that's not how this works. You can't just decide to not add counters to your Skilled Dark Magician. It is a mandatory effect. And they go, well, I don't have a Dark Magician in my deck. It doesn't matter. It's mandatory. Mandatory means mandatory, right? It doesn't say when a spell card's used, you may add a spell counter to this card. You have to do it. And you're thinking, well, why does it matter, man? Why does it matter? Well, there are quite a few reasons that it matters. And the main reason is that in GOAT format, you can activate the effect of something like Skilled Dark Magician, or Thunder Dragon for that matter, search your deck, and then fail to find. So, in particular, I've had games where I'm playing something like Monarchs, or something like Reasoning Gate, something that has brain control in it. I've been playing games where I have brain control, and one of the cool things that you can do when your opponent has a Skilled Dark Magician in play is you activate a bunch of spells, put all the counters on Skilled Dark Magician, brain control, take control of it, hit them for 19, main phase 2, sack Skilled Dark Magician, and fail to find. It's a pretty good play. However, if your opponent just refuses to add counters to their Skilled Dark Magician, well then how are you going to do that? So, yeah, I don't know why so many people just don't want to add counters to their Skilled Dark Magician. But yeah, please do that for me. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, if you have an opponent who's having an aneurysm over the fact that you're not adding counters to your Skilled Dark Magician, it might be me. So I apologize for that. But that is one of my biggest pet peeves in GOAT format. So anyways, sorry for the mini rant. Let me know if there's something that I left off the list. I think there might have been a few cards that I missed. And hey, if you're having an issue in one of your ranked games and your opponent doesn't know how one of these cards works, share this video with them, right? We've got to educate people. GOAT format is so much better when everyone knows the rules. That is something that is very important to me. I want to get to that point where everyone knows how every card works. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care.